Hello, Internet. The first days of 2022, and our topic today is Explainable Artificial Intelligence. First, we start with a definition. What is it? And why is it important? Well, if you have a company or if you code an AI system for your client, in 2022, it will become very essential that you see that there are some processes coming up that you have to take care of when you program an AI system. So let's start with a definition. One of the definitions of explainable AI is the application of built-in processes to AI models that allow human users to understand the steps and the outcomes created by machine learning algorithms. But as always, I always tell you, go back to the original source. If you want to really understand a problem, go back to the source. And here in our case, the source is not that easy. Let's have a look at Wikipedia. You see here, Explainable Artificial Intelligence is an AI system whose action can be easily understood by humans. Well, easily understood by humans, if you think about a deep graphical layer encoder, I don't think it is easily understandable by a human. So what is it and why is it a topic? So I just had a search here, a DuckDuckGo search, not a Google search, a DuckDuckGo search. And if I put in explainable AI in 2022, it tells me, well, IBM. Let's start IBM. Why not? What is it? What is explainable AI? Let's make it a little bit bigger. It's a set of processes and methods that allow human users to comprehend, to understand, and trust the result and the outputs created by machine learning algorithms. Okay, we have again another time a human user to understand, and suddenly we have to trust, and this is important, to trust the result of AI. And you see where I'm going. They tell her, yeah, you have to trust the system. You have to understand it and trust it. Sometimes this is not that easy, because why should I trust a system? Even my system I code, I do not trust. Google Cloud. Let's see what Google tells us. Explainable AI. Tools and frameworks to understand and interpret your machine learning models. Explainable, to make it a little bit bigger, explainable AI is a set of tools and frameworks, like IBM, to help you understand and interpret predictions. Now it's suddenly not trust, it is not that it is decisions, but suddenly we are able to interpret predictions made by your machine learning models. So, well, of course we make prediction in AI, but you see, why is there that every big company tries to define explainable AI in a slightly different way? What is the story behind this? Does it mean interpretable and inclusive AI systems under explainable AI system? And is there the feature of trust? Just trust us? Whenever people tell me that I should just trust them, I don't know. So, if you are in America, you have NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. So whenever there is something new coming up, when there is a regulation by a national government, it's always a good idea. Have a look at the Institute of Standards and Technology, because they provide the guidelines. And you can see here we have 4 principles of explainable AI. Make it a little bit bigger. You do not need this. And this is from August 2020. And this is official Department of Commerce. Department of Commerce, you will say. Interesting why they have a document about explainable AI and will become understandable for us in a minute. Just let's have a look at this and allow me to scroll through. We have here 4 principles of explainable AI. 4 fundamental principles as the Standardization Committee for Explainable AI. And they go on, we have explanation, meaningful, explanation accuracy, and knowledge limits. And they are defined below. So let's have a look. Explanation. System deliver accompanying evidence or reasons for all outputs. Does it mean this I, as somebody who codes an AI, who programs an AI, I have to develop a system that delivers accompanying evidence and or reason for the output of my system? Meaningful. Systems provide explanations that are understandable to the individual user. Now, this is funny. Now, if I do a system, an AI system for my client for aviation, the individual user, okay, who is the user of the system? Interesting. If you have a complex system, explanation accuracy. The explanation correctly reflects the system process for generating the output. The system only operates under conditions for which it was designed, or when the system reaches a sufficient confidence on its output. This becomes interesting. The American definition is always a little bit interesting. So let's have a deep dive. Explanation principle on AI systems. Supply evidence. Evidence is a legal term. Support or reasoning for each output. The reasoning for an output, if you go through a deep layered neural network, the reasoning for an output we receive, okay? This principle does not require that the evidence be correct. What? This principle does not require that the evidence be correct, informative, or intelligible. It merely states that the system is capable of providing an explanation, which does not require to be correct. Okay, this is a very interesting formulation of something. So you just have to have an explanation which the Institute of Standards tells you that the evidence does not require to be correct or informative or intelligible. Okay, I think we can stop here. We understand that the lobby from the big players, from the industry, helped here the system, the Institute for Standards, to write here something. And this looks interesting from the American way, US Department of Commerce. Okay, so maybe, you might say, maybe we are interested in something else. And this something else, give me a sec, something else. We have to go back here. And yes, okay. We switch now from America to Europe. And in Europe, you see that the General Data Protective Regulation is one of the most ambitious data privacy and AI mandate in the world. It is enforced right now, and it includes the right to a meaningful information about the logic involved in automated decision making. And if you want to have a look at it, check it. It's Article 13.2 from F to Article 15H, where you see that already right now you have, if you code an AI system and you are, I don't know, an enterprise, or you work for an enterprise, you have the obligation to have meaningful information about the logic involved in automated decision making. But you know, the European Union decided this is not far enough, and there is a new proposal for a regulation by the European Parliament and the Council, harmonized rules, for artificial intelligence, specific for artificial intelligence. And you know, there's always a loophole where they say, well, artificial intelligence, what is it? But I have given you here Annex 1, where it defines what is AI. And you have machine learning, supervised, unsupervised, reinforcement learning, variety of methods, including deep learning, all of deep learning. So it means this is it. Then you have the knowledge-based approaches, the knowledge representation, You have the inference, the deductive engine, the reasoning, optimization methods, search methods. So whatever AI system you code, you should know about the upcoming regulation by the European Commission, the European Parliament, if you want to sell your product or if your AI system will operate within the boundaries of the European Union in a European member state. So let's have a look at this. Let's have a look at this and say, why is it regulated? And I think this is highly informative. I have to increase the zoom a little bit. Here we are again. And it is 108 pages. And you might say, hey, I'm a coder. I don't care about the regulation by the European Union. Well, maybe you should have a look at this. And it took me some hours to read all of the document, and I highlighted what I thought would be interesting given the legal basis and your responsibility when you code an AI system. So the first thing to understand is everybody has fundamental rights within the EU. And I will show you this in a second. Where is it? And we could start here with every EU legal document has its definition and its scope. And so they define that the subject matter of this regulation on the scope of the application is the placing on the market, the putting into service, and the use of AI systems in Europe. So if you do something for Europe, this will apply to you. And they tell you, listen, we don't care about explainable or intuitive or whatever AI. If you have an AI system, you put it in the market, you put it in service, somebody uses it, this regulation is valid for you, and you are liable that you comply with this regulation. And they decide to split AI into 3 different topics. At first, you have the list of prohibited AI. Easy. Not allowed at all. This AI, no way you can use it in Europe. And then you have risk analysis. And they follow this risk-based approach, defining the AI circumstances or how you as an AI coder, what you have to take into account. And at first we have systems, AI system that pose an unacceptable risk, and I will show you what those AI systems are, and you will look. And then we have the AI systems with a high risk, and they make a risk assessment on your AI. And then you have the system with low and minimal risks. So, unacceptable, no way. High risk, with very special precautions. And then the systems with low and minimal risk. And if you think that your system is in low and minimal, think again. You will be surprised. Of course, real-time remote biometric identification systems are prohibited by European law. Full stop. No way. So, high risk. High risk, when you have a higher risk to health and safety or fundamental rights of a natural person are violated. So whatever they tell you, and this is just the preamble of the regulation. So this is just the front text. We will see that the regulation is in itself a little bit more complicated. AI systems. AI systems take into account a specific risk, and it applies for systems that interact with humans. So whatever system interacts with human, if the system just shows you, hey, you have a green light, go. It interacts with human. If you have a call desk that you have an AI system, interacts with human, whatever. Or system that uses to detect, so we have a passive detection, emotions of humans. Or determine association with social categories based on biometric data. Hey, this person has a big nose. I have a big nose, so not allowed at all. Or generate or manipulate content data like deepfakes. And then the obligation to disclose that the content is generated through automated means. So if you call somebody, you will hear in Europe, hey, you are not talking to an AI system and not a human being. And it goes on and on and on, and have a look at it. It is really informative. Monitoring and reporting obligations for provider of AI systems. Do you provide an AI system to a European region? Heaven's sake. So here we go. Here's our regulation, European Council, EP, and it involves the development, the marketing, and the use of artificial intelligence in conformity with union values. And you may say, yeah, yippee, finally! And you have a wide array of economic and social benefits by AI across the entire spectrum of industry and all social activity by its citizens. So AI has some positive side and some negative side. And they lay down the legal framework for rules on AI. If you deploy AI in Europe, these are your rules. Since we're a coder, we're not really interested in all legal effects, but high-risk AI systems should only be placed in the European Union market or put into service if they comply with certain mandatory requirements. You have to fulfill this, full stop, nothing else. And if you violate the rights of the European citizens, and those rights include, and this is really interesting here, you have the right to human dignity. So if your system somehow hampers the right to human dignity, which in itself is a challenging task to represent, you're in problem. You're in trouble. Respect for private and family right. This is a right you have. Protection of your personal data. Your human right in Europe. Freedom of expression, of information. Freedom of assembly. Freedom of association. Freedom of non-discrimination. Consumer protection. Worker rights. Rights of persons with disabilities, rights to an effective remedy and to a fair trial, the right to defense, and the presumption of innocence. If you violate the presumption of innocence with your AI system, you're in deep trouble. And the right to good administration. Well, this is interesting, but we are not the government. Of course, children in Europe have very specific rights, very special rights. But for the moment, we just want to grasp a little bit what's going on here. So which AI systems are covered by this regulation and by this proposed regulation? And this is AI system used in education or vocational training. So whatever it is, if you use something in education or training, vocational training, you have to respect this regulation. May violate the right to education and training as well as the right to not be discriminated against. Systems in employment, worker management and access to self-employment, the recruitment process, the selection of person, making decisions on promotion in a company, in a corporation, and determination of a specific job. Task allocation of your workers, monitoring, evaluation of persons in work-related contractual relationship, they are all classified as high risk. So whatever you do in education, in training, in employment, in worker management, in all of recruitment, everything about making decision on promotion, termination, task allocation, monitoring, evaluation of persons, this is a high-risk system. And for high-risk systems, special considerations apply. Also, of course, credit score and credit worthiness is AI, high-risk AI system. Migration, border control management, of course. Administration of justice, democratic processes are clearly high risk. And then, this is when I draw something with my mouse. You can see I'm really gifted. High-risk AI system. You have certain mandatory requirements should apply, taking into account the intended purpose and use of the system, risk management system. If you have an AI system, you have to have a risk management system, and it should be established by the provider of the AI system. So, if you are a small company and you have a very dedicated AI system, you better have a risk management system and you provide this and establish this. Requirements should apply to high-risk AI system regard the quality of datasets. Now, this is important because, all we do when we code an AI system, we have to have input data. Our system learns on data sets. You have the training data set, the evaluation data set, the whatever data set, and suddenly you are responsible with a high-risk AI system regarding the quality of the data set you use, and this you use in every AI system to train the system. And as I showed you with large language model, GPT-3 for example, if you have to prove that the quality of the data sets of your input data, that all the Twitter data that you use, that suddenly you have requirements on these data sets that you have to fulfill, this is an interesting part, and I think you should think about this. And I will show you something a little bit later on. So, all about the technical documentation. You have record keeping. You have transparency in the provision of information to user. You have human oversight. This is a particular topic that I'm interested in. Accuracy, cybersecurity. So, not at all easy to deploy an AI system in Europe. And they are right, because, high quality data is essential. If your input data are crap, what comes out of your deep neural network. So high data quality is essential for the performance of many AI systems, especially when AI systems take decisions that will influence your daily life. So the training data, the validation data, the testing data should be sufficiently relevant, representative, and free of errors. Now, if you use an LLM, let's say by Microsoft, who has to provide that the data set, and let's say all of Facebook is a data set for Microsoft, is representative and free of error and does not discriminate anybody? If you think about all the data in Facebook, wow! And if you train your AI system, suddenly you as a provider to the European citizens, you have to make sure that your data have high quality standards, meet high quality standards. And so we go on. Of course, if you are in the health data space, in the health business, there are even stricter regulation, of course. High-risk AI systems should therefore be accompanied by relevant documentation and instruction of use, and include concise and clear information, including in relation to possible risk, to fundamental rights of European citizens, and discrimination. So, hey, welcome! When you are an AI coder, you have a second job right now. But it makes sense. It makes sense if the livelihood of other people depend on your AI system. So, high-risk AI system, and even the slightest educational system, should be designed that natural persons can oversee their functioning. And now you understand why with Google and IBM we have, the human will understand everything. We have here a legal requirement that a natural person, a human being, can oversee the functioning. And you might say, okay, what does it mean, oversee the functioning of an AI system? What are the rights I have? What does he have to control? Who is responsible here for what? So now you understand where the big technology companies try to come up with their own technology definitions of some particular topics. It does make sense, yes. So you have to guarantee that the system is subject to built-in operational constraints that cannot be overridden by the system itself. If you have a self-learning system and you have to guarantee that the system cannot be overridden by the system itself, and it's a self-learning system, and that the system is responsive to a human operator. Wow, and that the natural person to whom human oversight has been assigned to, so you have assigned people, assigned natural person who have the oversight over your neural network. Of course, they have to have the necessary competence, the training, the authority to carry out that role. You have to document it. As so you say, hey, I want to code AI systems in Europe. Yes, I understand. You are enthusiastic. Appropriate level of accuracy, of robustness, of cybersecurity in your AI, of course. What else? Technical robustness is a key requirement for a high-risk AI system. Resilient against risk connected to the limitations, to error, false, inconsistent, unexpected situation. A self-learning system will run definitely into unexpected situations. But you see here, they have a human-centered approach for AI system where they say, hey, if the European citizens have their rights, you cannot deploy an AI system that will have a significant influence on the life of those people, and that you or the AI system, there's no excusing it was not me, it was the system, the AI, who had some negative impact on the European society. So they have this human-centric approach on AI. Cybersecurity, of course, we are cybersecurity experts, no problem. We know everything, our systems are perfect, we have no idea how they work, but what else? And then the high-risk AI system should bear a CE marking, so you get certified. Indicate the conformity with this regulation so they can move freely within the internal market of the European Union. So this was in, I don't know how many minutes I'm already talking, 26 minutes, and we are not even halfway through the EU regulation on AI. So you better think about AI system and how you have to code AI system and what you have to put into AI system if you want to deploy this AI system in the European market. And you see that the American market might have some other definition where it does not have to be correct at all. So different cities, different markets, different nation, different rules. So here we go. And of course, my goodness, the third part of AI system, the non-high-risk AI systems, they have no impact, so no education, no workforce, no hiring, no recruiting, no nothing, no health system, no, I don't know, credit worthiness, no nothing, some non-high-risk system. I think even if you I don't know, should be encouraged to create codes of conduct intended to foster, so they should also take into consideration the regulation for high-risk AI systems. Yippee! Yes, this is it! And if you are a not high-risk AI system, nevertheless, they have to be safe when placed on the market. And to contribute to this objective, there is a new EU directive, yippee, of the European Parliament, that applies a safety net if you think, okay, I'm non-high risk. There is a directive for you by the European Parliament that they take care about the rights of the European citizen. And I think this is great. This is great and it provides a lot of additional work if you code an AI system. But I think I wanted to show you this. And then here on page 39 of 108, now the official general document title 1 starts. This was just the prelude to this AI system regulation. So welcome. And of course, it will rules about placing AI system on the market, putting it into service. We generally use AI systems in the European Union. Prohibition of certain AI system, not allowed high-risk system. And you have transparency rules for AI systems intended to interact with natural persons. And it is okay that we have these systems here in Europe. This is great. So this is it for the legal part of it. I hope you got a short idea what is in front of you. And I want to show you two examples, two very quick examples. Just jump in full screen mode. And those two examples are the data. You saw that the data is so important. That the quality of the input data, of the data you train your AI system. But what is the real world data situation right now? If I buy or take an LLM from, I don't know, Microsoft or whoever has an LLM, and their training data set includes all of Twitter or all of Facebook or all of, I don't know, some social media platform. You have data, you cannot guarantee the quality of the data. And the filtering that is applied by those huge companies, as a coder, I don't know nothing about the filtering they did on their input data for an LLM. Two examples. Here, a Forbes article on Trump cuts tax, help billionaires to pay less taxes. And it's about 1.5 trillion tax cuts. And the other here from Germany, a Wirecard scandal where Ernst & Young and Wirecard, there was an article in Financial Times. You should have a read at this. I showed you, or I leave a link to this article by the Financial Times. For legal reasons, I'm not allowed to share this with you, but to tell you for AI, how many data we have that we cannot guarantee the quality of the data. And our first example, if you are in an election year, let's say in the US, and the candidate for the presidency says, hey, I will reduce all the taxes. And the head of state, so president, let's say, says 10 sentences about this, 100 sentences, or 1,000 sentences in all his shout-outs, where he says, I will reduce the taxes for everybody. And then his government repeats this, and suddenly you have 10,000 sentences. And then you have social media taking up this, and suddenly you have 50 million sentences on one social media platform. And if you take all the sentences of a social media platform, you have those 50 million sentences that the reduction of taxes will be good for a reason A, B, C, and whatever. But you also have the sentences that when it turns out that these taxes have been reduced primarily for a very special privileged group, the group of billionaires. And this is also all those sentences afterwards where they have the news where they tell you, hey, the tax reduction especially favored the billionaires. You have all the sentences of promises, you have all the sentences of happening, and then you have the result of this politician basket of presents. And all sentences are true, and you have 50 million sentences in your social media, and you take all sentences and you have 50 million sentences. I don't know. Is this a good quality set? Is this something the system should learn on? You shout reduce taxes, and then you have just a group that benefits, and the other group, 99% of the population, has nothing of it. It is. I'm not able to decide about this. But I use this data set. Therefore, I am kind of responsible for this, which is a little bit crazy for me. Second example, here in Germany. You have Wirecard. It is a German payment process and financial service provider. And now in 2020, the CEO and CEO have been arrested, remains a fugitive, wanted by the German police. And of course, this is a big scandal here. And you have also in social media, I don't know, Twitter, not only take Facebook or Instagram or whatever media you can imagine. If you have, I don't know, 1 trillion sentences of all media platforms in this world, and you take that as an input data to your AI system for your large language model, you have all those sentences as incorporated in the training set. And what you find out if you follow the presentation by the Financial Times, the articles, I showed you that they finalized that half of the revenue was not there and 1.9 billion of the company cash did not exist. And this was not so good, and the company had some question to answer, and Ernst & Young had some problems. So now suddenly you have a huge amount of people, the shareholders, who can only expect compensation for their loss, for their damages, if they can prove that a certain accounting company intentionally broke the auditing rules. And now suddenly you have an effect in the population of a nation where everybody who has invested in this company writes something on a social media platform. And then you have an additional 50 million sentences And for an AI system, for my training system, all sentences are equal. I don't say this is nonsense and this comes from a Republican and this is something a Democrat said. No, an AI system says, hey, all sentences are equal, all sentences are true. And from those certain sentences, my job as an AI is to learn the pattern. I have to learn the pattern, how it happens. And I, as an AI system, I have no logic deduction going on. I don't know what the word means. I just have symbols and I play around with the symbols in a configurational topological space. And I have 1 trillion symbols or 1.5 trillion tokens, like in the latest LLM. Those are symbols for me. But you know, if the system learns those symbols have an importance for us as human being. And there is something, if you say, some regulation comes up and say, hey, what about the ethical point of view? Is this ethical? What happened? Should an AI system have moral? Should an AI system behave ethical? Heaven say, I don't know. So Financial Times said, hey, they plunged a Big Four accountancy firm, you know, this specific firm, into one of the worst auditing scandals in recent history. And all of those sentences on this social media platform are true or equal, and they are learned by an AI system. And this is the input data side. So I didn't even start to code an AI system. This is just the input data. And now suddenly there's a regulation that tells you, hey, your system should behave ethical, should behave for the good of the people. And I say, yeah, I want to have this system. But heaven's sake, if I have in my input data set on social media, all sentences are true, all sentences are equal, and they show a pattern. And my job as an AI is to learn this pattern, to predict the future. Do you know what happens? A scandal blows up the whole thing, and I have 100 million sentences on this scandal, which is not representative for the industry, which is not what will happen in 99% of all cases. But I have it in my dataset, and my AI learns this to an unproportional high amount of significance is put on those scandals. And I have no idea how you will cope with this if your input data set has such a low quality, and especially those scandals, like they say here, worst auditing scandals, are so highly, so significantly represented in your input training data set. How you want to filter this out? Almost impossible. So, and now it makes sense that now the European regulator comes in and say, hey, we need explanatory artificial intelligence, because now I have 50 million of Wirecard and 50 million on Ernst & Young and 50 million sentences on the scandal and 50 million have what the shareholder wrote, and this big scandal in a population of more than 100 people, 100 million people. I have all those sentences, and all those sentences are in my input data set for my AI. And now the regulator comes in and say, tell me, does the system learn this 100 million, 200 million sentences? Did it learn it as a criminal act it should not follow? Or did it learn this behavior, this 100 million sentences, as the way an auditing should be? Is this a valid audit example we should recommend in the future? Because now you want to make sure, hey, the system learned that this was a fraud and a criminal act. And this is something that should not be predicted by the AI system for the future. Or if you want to have an even easier example, if you have, I don't know, 2 groups, and you have 100 million sentences of the first group, and you have 100 million sentences on social media, let's say Facebook, from the other group. And you get a new problem, and AI solves this new problem for you and tells you, hey, human being, I predict this is the best way. Did the AI now took the reasoning and the logic and the ethical behavior from group A, or did it took the emotions, the predictions, and the values of group B to come to a conclusion? And this is a non-trivial fact. And for this video, after 40 minutes, I will leave you with this conundrum of ethical behavior encoded in input data sets that we use as the first gate to start our input for AI systems to train them on, to be able to do some valuable prediction later on. So, how you as an AI coder want to take care about this boundary condition of your AI system. And now you understand why explainable AI suddenly makes sense in 2022 when AI systems are operational in our society and AI decides on human beings. Thank you for today, and I'll see you in the next video.